They tell you they work for your financial freedom. They promise stability, growth, and opportunity. But history tells a different story, a darker story. For centuries, governments have used the same hidden financial tricks to keep ordinary people broke, while consolidating wealth and power for themselves. And the most shocking part, these traps are being set for you right now. Welcome to Wealixon, where every story reveals how money, power, and history shape the world we live in. Here, we uncover the patterns behind inflation, crashes, empires, and the lessons they left behind. Let me tell you a story about the oldest con in the world. It's a story that begins not on Wall Street, but in the heart of an ancient empire, and it ends in your wallet today. Our story starts in the year 250 AD in the bustling Roman Forum. A legionary, fresh from defending the Danube frontier, marched to a market stall. In his leather purse, he carries his pay. Silver denarii, stamped with the stern face of the emperor. He wants to buy a new cloak for his wife. A year ago, 3 coins would have secured the finest wool. Today, the merchant scowls, demanding 5. The soldier is confused. His pay hasn't changed, but everything costs more. He doesn't see the trick. He can't see that the coins in his hand, once pure silver, have been secretly diluted with cheap copper. The emperors, desperate to pay for endless wars and bread for the mob, had ordered the mints to debase the currency. They were spending more than they had, and rather than raise taxes and face rebellion, they chose a quieter, more insidious method. They inflated the money supply. It was a silent, invisible tax on every single person who held a Roman coin. Their savings evaporated. Their labor was devalued. The government survived, but the people were left poorer. This was the first great financial trick, inflation. Now, let's leap forward 1,000 years. The scene shifts to a smoky hall in medieval London. The year is 1340. King Edward III is preparing for war with France. His royal coffers are empty. So he doesn't ask for taxes. Instead, he invites the wealthiest wool merchants of the city to a private audience. The invitation is not optional. He demands a loan. The language is courteous, draped in patriotism. "For the glory of England," he says. But the merchants know the truth. This is a forced loan. Refusal means their goods will be seized, their trade licenses revoked, or worse, they hand over their gold. The king promises repayment, but the promise is thin. Repayment, if it comes at all, will be in a currency he can debase, or it will be years later. The wealth is transferred from the productive class to the crown under the guise of duty. This is the second trick, coercion disguised as patriotism. Centuries roll on. The year is now 1694. In a lavish London drawing room, a deal is being struck that will change the world. King William III is also at war with France. He is perpetually broke. A group of wealthy financiers offers him a solution. They will lend him £1.2 million, a staggering sum. In return, he grants them a charter to form the Bank of England. This bank will manage the government's accounts and issue banknotes backed by the crown's promise to repay. It sounds technical, boring. But this is the birth of the modern financial system, and with it, the third and most sophisticated trick of all. Here's how it worked. The wealthy financiers bought government bonds. The government used that money to fight its wars. To pay the interest on those bonds, the government taxed the everyday purchases of the common man, beer, salt, candles. Think about the sheer, brutal elegance of this scheme. The wealthy lent money to the state and earned a safe, guaranteed return. The poor, who could never afford to buy bonds, paid the taxes that funded those returns. It was a perfect self-perpetuating wealth transfer machine. The state got its war chest, the elites got their risk-free income, and the masses paid the bill. This is the trick of state-sanctioned wealth transfer. These 3 ancient tricks, inflation, forced loans, and wealth transfer, are not relics. They are the blueprint. They have been refined, repackaged, and rebranded for the modern age, but their core purpose remains unchanged: to pick your pocket without you ever feeling a thing. Let's follow the thread into the 20th century. The year is 1917. The United States has entered the Great War. To finance the massive effort, the government launches Liberty Bonds. Posters everywhere feature Lady Liberty and stern Uncle Sam. Your country calls, they proclaim. It's a powerful, emotional appeal. Millions of ordinary Americans, from factory workers to farmers, buy these bonds, believing it is their patriotic duty, and it is. But behind the patriotism lies the old medieval trick. While common citizens bought bonds with their hard-earned dollars, the major Wall Street banks that underwrote the bond issues made enormous fees. J.P. Morgan and Co. acted as the primary commercial agent for the UK and France, making staggering profits. The war was financed by the masses, but the financial machinery profited the few at the top. The bonds themselves, while paid back, often did not keep pace with the inflation that the war spending itself created. The public sacrifice was real. The bankers' profits were guaranteed. This pattern repeats with terrifying consistency. The 2008 financial crisis. The story we were told was of a sudden, unpredictable tsunami that required heroic government intervention to save the global economy. The real story is far darker. For years, major banks had engaged in reckless behavior, creating incredibly complex financial weapons of mass destruction, toxic mortgage-backed securities, and credit default swaps. They made billions in fees and bonuses while the going was good. They privatized the gains. Then, the house of cards collapsed. And what happened? The governments of the world stepped in. They didn't let the failed institutions die. They bailed them out. Trillions of dollars of taxpayer money were funneled to these very banks. The CEOs kept their jobs and their bonuses. The shareholders were protected. The public, however, paid the price twice. First with their taxes funding the bailouts, and second with the devastating austerity, job losses, and foreclosures that followed. The old trick was now complete. Privatize the gains, socialize the losses. It's the medieval forced loan, but this time the king is the financial system and the merchants are the taxpayer. But the most insidious modern incarnation of the ancient Roman debasement is a policy with a deliberately obscure name, quantitative easing, QE. After the 2008 crash, central banks panicked. The old levers of cutting interest rates weren't enough. So they turned to something radical. They started creating money out of thin air. Not printing physical cash, but creating digital currency in their accounts. With this magical money, they went on a shopping spree, buying trillions of dollars worth of government bonds and other assets from the markets. They told the public this was necessary to stimulate the economy, to prevent deflation, to support job growth. The language was designed to confuse and reassure. But let's translate it into plain English. By creating massive demand for these assets, the central banks drove up their prices. What happens when bond prices go up? Their yields, or interest rates, go down. This made it cheap for governments to run up even more debt and for corporations to borrow. But who benefits from rising asset prices? The wealthy. The top 10% of households own over 80% of all stocks and financial assets. So, while the Fed and other central banks flooded the system with new money, the primary effect was to create the greatest bull market in history for the rich. The stock market soared. Real estate in wealthy enclaves skyrocketed. Billionaires saw their fortunes multiply. And what about the ordinary person? The waitress, the truck driver, the teacher? They don't own a portfolio of stocks and bonds. For them, this new money didn't magically appear in their bank accounts. Instead, it trickled down into the real economy in the form of rising costs, housing, healthcare, education. Their wages stagnated while the cost of living climbed. The value of their savings was eroded. This is the modern-day equivalent of the Roman emperor debasing the denarius. It is a silent, massive transfer of wealth from savers and wage earners to asset holders and the state. It is inflation, engineered by technocrats in suits instead of emperors in togas. And then, there is the greatest Ponzi scheme ever devised. One that makes Bernie Madoff look like a small-time thief, the government pension system. For decades, governments in the West have run pay-as-you-go pension schemes. You, the worker, pay a portion of your income into a system like Social Security with the promise that you will receive a pension when you retire. But the government doesn't take your money and invest it for you. It immediately spends that money on other things, today's roads, today's military, today's bureaucracy, and leaves an IOU in a filing cabinet. The entire system is a promise, a giant chain letter, that relies on a never-ending stream of new young workers to pay the benefits of the old retirees. This works beautifully in a world with a growing population. But what happens when the population ages? When birth rates collapse, as they have across the developed world? The ratio of workers to retirees plummets. Suddenly, there aren't enough young people paying in to support the old people cashing out. The system becomes mathematically insolvent. So, what does the government do? It doesn't admit the scam. It reforms the system. It raises the retirement age, meaning you have to work longer for the same benefit. It reduces the cost of living adjustments, meaning your pension buys less every year. It increases the taxes on those benefits. The promise made to you over a lifetime of work is broken, slowly and deliberately, through 1,000 technical adjustments. The generation that paid in their entire lives gets a fraction of what they were promised. The government, having spent their money, walks away from its obligation. It is the ultimate betrayal, disguised as responsible fiscal management. Why do these tricks work, century after century, regime after regime? The answer lies in two powerful weapons: complexity and perception. Governments and their central banks have weaponized boredom. They use language designed to put you to sleep: quantitative easing, yield curve control, secured overnight financing rate. This is not an accident. It is a strategy. If the public cannot understand what is being done, they cannot oppose it. In ancient Rome, you could bite a coin and feel the soft copper underneath the silver wash. Today, you need a PhD in economics to even read the central bank's policy statement. The complexity is the camouflage. And then there's the management of perception. Every one of these tricks is sold to you as a necessary, even benevolent act. Inflation is sold as a sign of a healthy, growing economy. Bailouts are sold as necessary to save the system and protect jobs. Runaway debt is sold as critical investment in our future. Pension cuts are sold as responsible reforms to ensure sustainability. The language is always positive, always forward-looking, always for the common good. The reality, the wealth transfer, the erosion of your freedom, the broken promises, is hidden behind this curtain of positive rhetoric. This brings us to the present day, the COVID-19 pandemic, a genuine global crisis. And what was the response? The largest, most aggressive financial intervention in human history. Trillions upon trillions of dollars, euros, and yen were created and sprayed into the economy. Stimulus checks, business loans, massive asset purchases. Once again, the public was told this was essential, life-saving, and parts of it were. But once again, we must look past the headlines and follow the money. A huge portion of that newly created capital flooded into financial markets, blowing the mother of all asset bubbles. Stock markets hit all-time highs in the middle of a devastating economic shutdown. Cryptocurrencies went parabolic. The wealth of billionaires increased by over $4 trillion. Meanwhile, supply chains broke, and now we face the inevitable hangover: the highest inflation rates in 40 years. The silent tax of the Romans is here again, eating away at your paycheck and your savings. The ancient cycle is repeating. The emergency spending, the money creation, the asset inflation for the rich, and the price inflation for the poor. The lesson of the last 2,000 years is terrifyingly simple. The system is not designed for you to win. It is designed to preserve itself and to enrich the connected class that controls the levers of money and power. Your financial struggle is not a personal failure. It is the outcome of a system working exactly as intended. So, what can you do? The first and most powerful step is to see the trap. When you understand that inflation is not an act of God but a policy choice, you stop being a victim of it. You start looking for ways to protect yourself with real assets like productive land, precious metals, or certain types of productive companies, things that cannot be inflated away with the click of a keyboard. You become skeptical of official narratives. When the government announces a new stimulus or investment, you ask the oldest question in the world: cui bono? Who benefits? You follow the money. You recognize that your retirement cannot depend on the promises of a bankrupt state, and you take personal responsibility for building your own safety net. Financial education is not just about getting rich. It is an act of resistance. It is the difference between being a player in the game and being the pawn on the board. History doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes. The same financial melodies that bankrupted Roman legionaries and medieval merchants are playing for you today. The question is, are you listening? This is why Wealixon exists. We tear down the curtain of complexity and show you the real mechanisms of money, power, and control. We give you the context that schools won't teach and the media won't report. If you are tired of being a pawn in a game you don't understand, if you want to see the patterns before they dictate your life, then you need to understand the rules. Subscribe to Wealixon, because in an age of deception, the most radical thing you can do is to seek the truth. We provide the maps that history left behind, so you can navigate the traps of the present and the dangers of the future. Don't just watch history happen to you. Understand the forces behind it. Subscribe now